The wallet was stuffed with $100 bills, exactly 100 of them. I counted them twice to be absolutely certain, my fingers trembling slightly as I rifled through the crisp paper, and when I found it wedged deep under the executive desk at 11:47 p.m. on a cold Tuesday night in November, my first thought wasn't about keeping the money, though God knows I needed it, but about wondering how in the hell someone could lose $10,000 in cash and not tear the entire goddamn building apart brick by brick searching for it. I'd been on my knees for the better part of 10 minutes, scrubbing underneath that massive mahogany desk in the executive suite of Hammond Financial Services, my back aching from the awkward angle, my knees protesting against the hard floor despite the knee pads I wore. The cleaning rag in my left hand was soaked with wood polish, the chemical smell making my eyes water. My right hand held the industrial flashlight I'd bought with my own money, because the company issued one had broken 3 months ago and they still hadn't replaced it. That's how it went when you worked the night shift as a janitor. You were invisible, forgettable. The person who cleaned up after important people but who would never be important yourself. The wallet had been wedged far back, pushed against the wall where it must have fallen from someone's pocket, and then gotten kicked further back with every subsequent meeting held at that desk. The leather was soft, expensive, the kind that gets better with age instead of falling apart like everything else in my life seemed to do. Italian, probably. Hand-stitched. The corners were rounded from years of sitting in someone's back pocket, the leather worn smooth by countless removals and replacements, by the friction of fabric and movement and time. I pulled it out carefully, my heart already starting to pound with a mixture of curiosity and something else, dread, maybe, or anticipation. I sat back on my heels and wiped my hands on my work pants before opening it. The smell hit me first, expensive cologne mixed with old paper and that particular scent money has when it's been sitting undisturbed for a while. Not the smell of bills that have passed through hundreds of hands, but the clean, crisp smell of money that came from a bank and went straight into a wallet without stopping anywhere else first. The bills were in perfect condition, sequential serial numbers, all $100 bills. Benjamin Franklin staring up at me with that knowing half-smile he has on the currency, like he understood something about human nature that the rest of us were still trying to figure out. I counted them once, getting to 100 and feeling my stomach drop. Counted them again, more slowly, making absolutely certain I wasn't making a mistake. 100 bills, $10,000, nearly half my annual salary sitting in my hands. For a long moment, maybe a full minute, maybe longer, time seemed to stretch and compress in strange ways. I just sat there on the floor of that executive suite, surrounded by the tools of my trade, the mop bucket on wheels that squeaked no matter how much WD-40 I used, the industrial vacuum cleaner with the frayed cord I'd repaired myself with electrical tape, the spray bottles of various cleaning solutions, the rags and brushes and all the equipment of a profession that people looked through rather than at. And in my hands, more money than I'd ever held at once in my entire 30 years of life. My mind raced through possibilities. I could keep it. God knows I needed it. My car, a 2008 Honda Civic with 180,000 miles on the odometer and a transmission that made sounds like a dying cat every time I shifted into third gear, was one breakdown away from leaving me stranded. The inspection sticker had expired 2 months ago, but I hadn't been able to afford the repairs needed to pass, so I'd been driving illegally and praying I didn't get pulled over. My apartment, a studio in a building that should have been condemned years ago, had a leak in the ceiling that dripped steadily into a bucket I had to empty twice a day. The landlord kept promising to fix it, but never did, and I couldn't afford to move somewhere better. I'd been eating ramen noodles for dinner 6 nights a week, because that's what I could afford on my salary of $22,000 a year. $10,000 would change everything. I could fix my car, could pay for the repairs and the inspection, and maybe even have enough left over for new tires, which I desperately needed before winter really set in. Could pay my landlord to fix the leak, or, better yet, could afford to move somewhere that didn't have black mold growing in the corners and cockroaches that appeared no matter how clean I kept the place. Could buy real food, meat, fresh vegetables, things that didn't come from a box or a can. Could go to the dentist for the first time in 4 years, get that cavity filled that had been bothering me, get my teeth cleaned properly instead of just brushing and hoping for the best. Could pay off some of the medical debt from my mother's final illness, the bills that still came every month, even though she'd been dead for 3 years. Bills that had my name on them because I'd been stupid enough to sign as a guarantor when she'd gone into the hospital that last time. $23,000 in medical debt, and the collection agencies called 3 or 4 times a week, always with the same questions, always with the same threats, always reminding me that I'd failed my mother in the end, that I hadn't been able to save her or even pay for the treatment that didn't save her. I could do all of that with this money, could solve half my problems with this single leather wallet and its 100 perfect bills. But even as I thought these things, even as I cataloged all the ways this money could improve my life, I knew I wasn't going to keep it, couldn't keep it. My mother, God rest her soul, may she finally have the peace in heaven that she never found in life, had raised me better than that. She drilled honesty into me from the time I was old enough to understand the concept, had taught me that there were lines you didn't cross, no matter how desperate you were, no matter how much you needed something, no matter how easy it would be to take what wasn't yours. "Nickolas," she used to say, her hand on my shoulder, her eyes, the same blue eyes I'd inherited from her, serious and intent. "You find something that doesn't belong to you, you give it back. Every time. No exceptions, no matter what. That's what separates decent people from trash. That's what separates people who can look at themselves in the mirror from people who have to avoid their own reflection. We might not have much, but we have our integrity. Don't ever let anyone take that from you, and don't ever give it away for something as meaningless as money." She'd said it when I was 6 and found a dollar bill on the playground at school. Made me take it to the teacher, even though I'd wanted to use it to buy candy from the vending machine. She'd said it when I was 12 and found a watch in the locker room after gym class, a nice watch that probably cost more than we spent on groceries in a month. Made me turn it in to the lost and found, even though we both knew whoever had lost it could afford to replace it, while we couldn't afford much of anything. She'd said it when I was 16 and working my first real job bagging groceries, when I'd found an envelope with $200 in cash in the parking lot. She'd made me bring it back into the store, made me stand there while they announced it over the loudspeaker, made me watch as some woman I'd never seen before claimed it without even offering a reward, without even saying thank you. And every time, after I'd done the right thing and returned what I'd found, my mother had looked at me with such pride, such fierce love, that it made all the sacrifice worth it. "That's my boy," she'd say. "That's the man I'm raising you to be. Someone who does what's right even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." She'd been dead for 3 years now, 3 years, 2 months, and 14 days. But who was counting? And I still heard her voice in my head constantly, still felt her presence guiding me, still tried to live up to the example she'd set. Cancer had taken her, breast cancer that by the time they found it had already spread to her lymph nodes and her liver and her bones. 2 years from diagnosis to passing, 2 years of watching her shrink and fade and hurt, 2 years of feeling completely helpless while the woman who'd raised me alone, who'd worked 2 and sometimes 3 jobs to keep us fed and housed, who'd sacrificed everything for me, slowly died in a hospital bed she couldn't afford. The medical bills had been astronomical. Even with Medicaid covering some of it, the out-of-pocket expenses had been crushing. I'd taken out credit cards I couldn't afford to pay off, had borrowed money from anyone who would lend it, had signed forms and agreements without reading them carefully, because I was so desperate to do something, anything, to help her. In the end, none of it had mattered. She'd died anyway, and I'd been left with a mountain of debt and a hole in my life so big I still hadn't figured out how to navigate around it. But she'd raised me to be honest, to do the right thing, to return what didn't belong to me. And so, despite the 10,000 reasons to keep that wallet, I knew I was going to give it back. I looked at the driver's license tucked into a sleeve inside the wallet. The photo showed a man in his early 60s, maybe late 50s. It was hard to tell exactly. White hair, neatly cut and styled. Sharp blue eyes that looked directly at the camera with the kind of confidence that came from a lifetime of having doors opened for you, of being taken seriously, of mattering. Strong jaw, straight nose, the kind of face you'd see in a boardroom or a country club, the kind of face that belonged to someone who'd never worried about making rent or affording groceries or whether their car would start in the morning. The name on the license read, William Ashford. Date of birth showed he was 62 years old. The address listed was 1847 Maple Grove Lane, Riverside, Connecticut. Riverside. I knew the name of the town, though I'd never been there. It was money. Old money. The kind of place where houses sat on multiple acres instead of being crammed together like sardines, where the roads were private and the schools were exclusive, and everyone knew everyone else because they'd all summered together in the Hamptons or Martha's Vineyard or whatever other places rich people went to avoid the rest of us. No credit cards in the wallet, which struck me as odd. No family photos tucked into the sleeves. No business cards or membership cards or any of the usual detritus people carried around. Just the license and the cash. $10,000 in cash, carried around like it was pocket change, like losing it would be an inconvenience rather than a catastrophe. I looked at the clock on the wall. It was 11:53 p.m. now. I still had 2 hours left on my shift. The entire 15th floor to finish, plus the restrooms on the 14th floor that the day crew had missed. I had work to do, a job to finish, responsibilities to meet. But I also had this wallet burning a hole in my pocket and an address I could look up on my phone and a decision I'd already made without really thinking about it. I finished cleaning the executive suite quickly, more quickly than I should have, probably missing spots I'd normally catch, but too distracted to care. Emptied the trash cans into my rolling bin, gave the desk one final wipe down, made sure everything looked exactly as it should for when the executives arrived in the morning. Perfect, pristine, as if the offices cleaned themselves overnight, as if people like me didn't exist. Then I moved through the rest of the building on autopilot, my mind elsewhere. Mopped the hallway floors with long, practiced strokes. Emptied the recycling bins, sorting the paper from the plastic from the glass, because the building had strict recycling policies and my supervisor checked. Vacuumed the conference rooms, pushing the heavy vacuum around the long tables, under the expensive leather chairs. Scrubbed the restrooms until they gleamed, replaced the paper towels and toilet paper, made sure there were no water spots on the mirrors. By 1:47 a.m. I was done. I clocked out using the time card system in the janitor's closet on the first floor, packed up my supplies, and walked out into the cold November night. The city was quiet at this hour, that particular stillness that settles over urban areas in the dead hours between night and morning. The bars had closed an hour ago. The last of the club-goers had stumbled home or into cabs. The early morning workers, the bakers and the delivery drivers, and the people who started their shifts at 4 a.m., hadn't emerged yet. My Honda was in the parking garage where I'd left it that evening, alone on the level that was free for employees who worked after 6 p.m. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting strange shadows. My footsteps echoed off the concrete as I walked toward it. The car looked tired in the harsh light, the paint faded, the bumper held on with duct tape where I'd backed into a pole 2 years ago and couldn't afford to get it properly fixed. I got in, turned the key, and was rewarded with the grinding sound the transmission made before finally catching. The engine turned over with a cough and a rattle. I let it warm up for a minute while I pulled out my phone and typed the address into my GPS. 1847 Maple Grove Lane, Riverside, Connecticut. The route appeared on the screen. 42 minutes from my current location. Straight up I-95 and then into the winding roads of Riverside. I looked at the clock on my dashboard, 2:03 a.m. If I drove there now, returned the wallet, and drove back to my apartment, I'd get home around 4 a.m. I could sleep for a few hours before I had to be at my second job at 10 a.m. I worked weekend mornings at a grocery store, stocking shelves for minimum wage because one job didn't cover my expenses. It was stupid to drive to Riverside at 2 a.m., stupid and possibly dangerous and definitely something that could wait until a reasonable hour. But the wallet felt like it was burning a hole in my jacket pocket, and something about the address nagged at me, pulled at the edges of my memory, in a way I couldn't explain. 1847 Maple Grove Lane. The address meant something. I knew it somehow, even though I'd never been to Riverside, even though I'd never known anyone who lived in a place like that. So I put the car in gear, listened to it grind and protest, and drove out of the parking garage into the empty city streets. The drive started out normal enough. The city at 2 a.m. was a different place than during the day. Quieter, darker, simultaneously more peaceful and more threatening. I drove past closed storefronts with security gates pulled down, past 24-hour convenience stores with harsh fluorescent lights and bored clerks, past apartment buildings where most of the windows were dark, but a few showed the glow of insomnia or late-night television. As I got onto I-95 heading north, the city gradually fell away. The buildings got shorter, the spaces between them got wider. Trees appeared, first sporadically and then in increasing numbers, until I was driving through what felt like forest, interrupted by occasional clusters of civilization. The traffic was light, just a few cars, mostly people driving home from late shifts or early shifts, all of us existing in this liminal space between one day and the next. I stayed in the right lane, not trusting my car to maintain highway speed for long, listening to the transmission groan every time I had to accelerate. My mind wandered as I drove, the way it always did during long stretches of highway. I thought about my mother, about the last conversation we'd had before she died. She'd been so thin by then, her skin almost translucent, her hair gone from the chemotherapy. But her mind had still been sharp, and she'd gripped my hand with surprising strength and made me promise something. "Nickolas," she'd said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I need you to promise me something." "Anything, Mom. You know that." "Promise me you won't let what happened to me make you bitter. Promise me you'll stay the good man I raised you to be. It's so easy to let hardship turn you mean, to let loss make you selfish. But you're better than that. Promise me you'll remember that." "I promise." "And Nickolas, if you ever get the chance for something better, a better job, a better life, anything, you take it. Don't let loyalty to my memory keep you stuck. I want you to be happy. That's all I've ever wanted." I'd promised her that too, even though I couldn't imagine what something better might look like. I'd been cleaning offices for 2 years by then. Before that, I'd worked at the grocery store full-time, and before that, a series of minimum wage jobs that had gotten me nowhere. I had a high school diploma, but no college degree, couldn't afford it, couldn't afford to stop working long enough to go to school, couldn't see a path from where I was to anywhere better. My mother had wanted me to go to college. She'd scraped together money for community college classes when I'd graduated high school, but I'd had to drop out after one semester, because we needed the money more than we needed my education. She'd been disappointed, but she'd understood. She always understood. I'd wanted to be a veterinarian when I was a kid, loved animals, loved taking care of things, loved the idea of healing and helping. But that dream had died somewhere along the way, buried under the weight of bills and responsibilities and the basic need to survive. Now I cleaned offices and stocked shelves and tried not to think too much about the life I'd imagined when I was young, and still believed that good things happened to good people. The exit for Riverside appeared sooner than I expected. I pulled off I-95 onto a smaller highway and then onto even smaller roads that wound through increasingly dense forest. The houses here were set back from the road, hidden behind gates and long driveways and carefully maintained landscaping. The streetlights were spaced far apart, leaving long stretches of darkness between pools of light. My GPS directed me through a series of turns, each road seeming to get narrower and more exclusive than the last. Maple Grove Lane was barely marked, just a small green sign that I almost missed. I turned onto it and found myself driving down a road that was more like a private lane, perfectly paved, lined with massive old trees that formed a canopy overhead. The houses here weren't just big, they were estates, sprawling properties with manicured lawns and professional landscaping, and the kind of wealth that didn't need to announce itself because everyone already knew it was there. This was generational wealth, old money, the kind of money that accumulated over decades or centuries, that got passed down through families, that came with expectations and obligations and a whole world of privilege I'd never experienced. 1847, Maple Grove Lane appeared on my right. The house was set back from the road behind a wrought iron fence that had to be at least 8 feet tall. Even from the road, I could see the property was enormous. The driveway curved away through manicured grounds, disappearing behind carefully shaped hedges and ornamental trees. Landscape lighting illuminated stone paths and garden beds, even at this hour. I pulled up to the gate and stopped, my Honda's engine rattling in the quiet night. The gate was closed but not locked. I could see that from where I sat. A keypad on a post suggested it could be locked electronically, but right now it was just closed. And then something strange happened. Something I couldn't explain and still don't fully understand. I recognized this place. Not consciously. Not like, I've been here before and I remember when and why. But something deeper than memory. Something more fundamental. A recognition that bypassed my conscious mind and went straight to some older part of my brain. The part that remembered things from before language, before rational thought. I'd been here before. I knew I had. The certainty was absolute, undeniable, even though it made no logical sense. I turned off the engine and sat in the sudden silence, staring at the gate and the property beyond. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles had gone white. My heart was pounding, adrenaline flooding my system for no reason I could articulate. And then the memories started to surface. Not clear memories. Nothing I could grab onto or examine closely. Just fragments, pieces, impressions that might have been real, or might have been dreams, or might have been something I'd seen in a movie once and was now confusing with my own life. Roses. I remembered roses. A garden full of them. Massive bushes heavy with blooms in every color, red and pink and white and yellow. The smell had been overwhelming, almost too much, sweet and heady and intoxicating. I'd been small enough that the bushes towered over me. I'd walked through that garden, my small hand held by someone bigger, someone who'd pointed out the different varieties and told me their names. Hybrid tea roses, floribundas, climbing roses that covered an archway leading to some other part of the garden. A dog, a black dog, massive and friendly with a tail that never stopped wagging. It had knocked me over once. I remembered falling backwards onto soft grass, the dog's face filling my vision, its tongue licking my face while I laughed so hard I couldn't breathe. What was the dog's name? Duke. The name surfaced from somewhere deep in my memory. Duke. The dog's name had been Duke. Rabbits. Dozens of them, hopping across a lawn that seemed to stretch forever. White rabbits and brown rabbits and spotted rabbits, living in some kind of hutch or warren near a stable or barn. I'd chased them, running across that endless lawn, my legs pumping, my lungs burning, never actually catching them because that wasn't the point. The point was the running, the freedom, the joy of being small and safe and loved. But that was impossible. I'd never lived anywhere like this. I'd grown up in a series of cramped apartments in the city. My mother and I squeezed into studios and one-bedrooms, moving every year or two when the rent went up, or the landlord decided to renovate, or we got evicted for being late on payments. We'd never had a yard. We'd never had pets beyond that goldfish that died. We'd never had space or security, or any of the things that came with places like this. So why did I remember it? Why did this house, this property, these specific details feel more real than my actual childhood memories. I got out of the car, my legs shaky. The November night was cold, cold enough that I could see my breath in clouds, cold enough that I wished I'd worn a heavier jacket. But I barely noticed the temperature. I was too focused on the gate, on the property beyond, on the impossible familiarity of it all. The gate swung open when I pushed it, unlocked. I walked through and started up the long driveway, my footsteps crunching on gravel. Motion sensor lights clicked on as I approached, flooding the area in harsh white light that made me squint and throw up a hand to shield my eyes. The house was bigger up close than it had looked from the road. 3 stories of white stone with black shutters and a wraparound porch. Columns holding up the porch roof. Windows that glowed faintly with security lights. The kind of architecture that was built to last, that had probably stood for 100 years and would stand for 100 more. Victorian, I thought. Or maybe Georgian. I didn't know enough about architecture to be sure. I just knew it was old and expensive and imposing in a way that made me acutely aware of how I looked. Rumpled work clothes, scuffed shoes, probably smelling like cleaning chemicals and sweat from my shift. To the right of the main house, I could see outbuildings. Stables, definitely. I could see the wooden fencing of paddocks, could hear the soft sounds of horses moving restlessly in the night. One of them whinnied softly, and the sound sent a shiver down my spine. I knew that sound. I'd heard it before. But when? Where? To the left was a garden. Dormant now for winter, the plants cut back, the beds carefully mulched. But I could see the structure of it, the carefully arranged beds, the archway covered in dead vines that would be covered in roses in the spring, the stone bench in the center surrounded by skeletal bushes that I knew, absolutely knew, would bloom with hundreds of flowers in a few months. This was the rose garden I'd remembered. This exact garden. I'd walked through it when I was small. I'd smelled those roses. I'd sat on that bench. But how? When? Why didn't I remember more? A shape moved in the shadows near the stable. I tensed, then forced myself to relax when I saw it was a dog. Large, black. It emerged from the shadows slowly, not aggressive but cautious. When it got close enough for me to see it clearly in the security lights, my breath caught. It looked exactly like the dog from my memory. Big black body, friendly face, intelligent eyes that watched me with curiosity rather than suspicion. It didn't bark, just came close enough to sniff my hand, then pushed its head against my palm in the universal dog signal for pet me. I scratched behind its ears automatically, my hands knowing what to do even though my brain was still trying to catch up. The dog made a satisfied sound and leaned against my legs, its tail wagging slowly. "Duke?" I said softly, and then wondered why I'd said it. This couldn't be the same dog from my memory. That dog would be ancient by now, probably dead. But this dog looked so similar, and the name had just come out without thinking, like my mouth knew something my brain didn't. The dog's tail wagged harder at the name, and it looked up at me with those intelligent eyes. Impossible. All of this was impossible. I walked up to the front porch, the dog following me, and stood in front of the massive wooden door with its brass knocker shaped like a lion's head. The wallet in my jacket pocket felt like it weighed 100 pounds. My hands were shaking, from cold or nerves or something else I couldn't tell. This was crazy. It was 2:47 a.m. according to my phone. What kind of person shows up at a stranger's house at 2:47 in the morning to return a wallet? A crazy person, an irresponsible person, someone who should have just waited until morning, found a phone number, called during business hours like a normal human being. But I was already here. The wallet was already in my hand, pulled from my pocket without me consciously deciding to do so. And I needed to know why this place felt like home, needed to understand these memories that made no sense, needed answers to questions I didn't even know how to ask. I raised my hand and knocked. 3 solid raps with the brass knocker that echoed in the pre-dawn stillness. Nothing. I waited, counting to 30 in my head the way my mother had taught me to count during thunderstorms when I was little and scared of the lightning. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. At 30 Mississippi, I knocked again. Harder this time, more insistent. Lights came on inside the house. I heard footsteps, heavy, slow, the kind of steps that belonged to someone who'd been woken from deep sleep and wasn't happy about it. The steps got closer. I heard the sound of locks being undone, a security chain being slid into place. The door opened a crack, maybe 4 inches, the security chain taut. A man's face appeared in the gap, white hair tousled from sleep. Sharp blue eyes that were alert despite the hour, assessing me with the kind of quick intelligence that came from a lifetime of reading people and situations. He wore a burgundy silk robe over what looked like expensive pajamas, and perched on his shoulder, gripping with taloned feet, was a parrot. Bright green body with a red head and yellow markings around the eyes. It cocked its head at me, fixing me with one black eye, and made a soft clicking sound. "Can I help you?" the man asked. His voice was cultured, educated, the kind of accent that came from expensive schools and summers abroad, and a whole world of privilege I'd never experienced. But there was no hostility in it, just curiosity and perhaps a touch of wariness, which was reasonable given that a stranger was knocking on his door at 3 a.m. "I'm sorry to bother you so late," I said. My voice sounded rough compared to his, working class and tired, and all the things I'd tried to educate out of it over the years, but never quite succeeded. "My name is Nickolas Turner. I found your wallet at my workplace tonight. I wanted to return it." I held up the wallet so he could see it through the crack in the door. The man's eyes widened slightly, then focused on the wallet with an intensity that suggested he'd been looking for it. "My wallet? I've been tearing my house apart looking for that thing. Where did you say you found it?" "Hammond Financial Services, downtown. It was wedged under a desk in the executive suite. I work the night cleaning shift there. Hammond Financial." The man nodded slowly. "Yes, I was there last week. Had a meeting with Jonathan Hammond about restructuring some trust fund assets. I must have dropped it somehow, but—" He paused, studying me more carefully through the gap in the door. "You said you found $10,000 in cash and you're returning it. At 3 in the morning?" "Yes, sir. I finished my shift about an hour ago and came straight here. I figured you might be worried about it, and I don't really have a phone number to call, just the address from your license." The man was silent for a long moment, his eyes moving over my face with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. The parrot on his shoulder made that clicking sound again, then said in a surprisingly clear voice, "Good boy. Good boy." A small smile tugged at the corner of the man's mouth. "Einstein seems to approve of you. That's unusual. He's extremely particular about people. Most strangers make him anxious, but he seems to like you." "Einstein?" "The parrot. I've had him for nearly 30 years. He's proven to be an excellent judge of character." The man undid the security chain and opened the door wider. The porch light fell fully across his face now, and I saw him clearly for the first time without shadows or obstacles. And my entire world tilted sideways, because I was looking at myself. Or rather, I was looking at what I would look like in 35 years. The resemblance was so striking it stole my breath. Same square jaw, mine was a bit less defined because I hadn't hit 60 yet, but the basic structure was identical. Same slightly crooked nose. Mine had been broken when I was 17, gotten into a fight defending a kid who was being bullied, and we'd never had the money to get it set properly. His looked like it had been broken at some point too, though it had probably been set by an expensive doctor instead of just healing crooked like mine had. Same sharp blue eyes, the exact shade of blue, the same intense way of looking that made you feel like you were being seen all the way down to your soul. Same way of standing with the left shoulder slightly higher than the right. I'd never noticed I did that until I saw it in him. Same crease between the eyebrows that came from squinting or worrying or both. The similarities went beyond just general features. There were specific, undeniable matches. The way his hairline would have looked before it receded, the shape of his ears, the exact curve of his mouth. Even his hands, visible as he gripped the doorframe, long fingers, broad palms, the same hands I'd inherited, though his were older and more weathered. It was like looking into a mirror that showed me the future, like seeing a photograph of what I'd become in 3 decades if I lived that long. The man saw it too. I watched the color drain from his face, watched his eyes widen, watched his hand come up to grip the doorframe like he needed it to keep from falling. The parrot flapped its wings, squawking in agitation at the sudden movement. "Dear God," the man whispered. His voice shook. "It's not possible. You can't be." He broke off, staring at me like I was a ghost, like I was something impossible that had materialized on his porch in the middle of the night. "Can't be what?" I managed to ask. My voice came out hoarse, but the man wasn't listening. His eyes were moving over my face systematically, cataloging every feature, comparing them to something in his memory. I watched him process the similarities, watched realization dawn and then crash over him like a wave. His hand reached out slowly, trembling, and touched my cheek. His fingers were cold against my skin. "You have Sarah's mouth," he said softly, wonder and grief mixing in his voice. "Her exact mouth, the way it curves at the corners, the shape of your lips. I'd know it anywhere. I'd know it in my sleep. I've been seeing it in my dreams for 30 years. Who's Sarah?" But even as I asked the question, I knew. Deep in my gut, in that place that knew things before your brain processed them, I knew exactly who Sarah was. Sarah was my mother. Sarah Turner. The woman who'd raised me alone. The woman who'd worked herself to exhaustion to keep us fed and housed. The woman who died 3 years ago without ever telling me she'd been married, without ever mentioning that my father wasn't some anonymous sperm donor or one-night stand, but an actual person who existed somewhere in the world. The man's eyes filled with tears, actual tears spilling down his cheeks and dripping onto his expensive robe. He made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob, a sound of pure disbelief and joy and grief all tangled together. "Sarah was my wife," he said. His voice broke on the word. "Your mother, which makes you—" He couldn't finish the sentence, just stared at me, with tears running down his face. The wallet slipped from my fingers, hit the porch floor with a soft thud that seemed impossibly loud in the sudden silence. Bills scattered in the breeze that swept across the porch, $100 bills tumbling away like leaves, and I didn't notice, didn't care. I was too busy trying to process what he'd just said, trying to reorganize my entire understanding of my life around this single piece of information. My father. This man, this wealthy stranger living in a mansion in Riverside, was my father. I'd never had a father. My entire life, I'd believed I didn't have a father. My mother had told me he was gone before I was born, that she'd been alone, that it was just the two of us. She'd told me this story so many times, with such conviction, that I'd stopped asking questions by the time I was 7 or 8, just accepted it as truth. The absent father was such a common story that I'd never questioned it, never pushed for details, never wondered if there might be more to the story than what my mother chose to share. But she'd lied. She'd lied to me my entire life. And now I was standing on the porch of my father's mansion, having returned his wallet in the middle of the night, and nothing I'd believed about my life was true. My mother said, I started, but my voice wouldn't work properly. I had to clear my throat and try again. My mother told me you were gone, that you left before I was born, that you wanted nothing to do with us. I know, that's what I told her to tell you. William Ashford, because that's who this had to be. William Ashford, whose wallet I'd found, whose house I'd driven to, whose face was my own face aged 30 years, stepped back from the door. That's what I paid her to tell you. That's what I paid her to make sure you never knew I existed. But you need to come inside. This is going to take a very long time to explain, and you're going to want to sit down for it, possibly want to drink something stronger than coffee, and you're going to have a lot of questions, all of which you're entitled to, all of which I'll answer. But first, come inside. It's cold out here, and we have 3 decades to catch up on. He stepped aside, holding the door open, waiting for me to make a choice. I could turn around, could get back in my car and drive away, could pretend this never happened, could return to my simple life of cleaning offices and stocking shelves and never thinking about the father I didn't have. Or I could step through that door and into a truth that would change everything. I stepped through the door. The inside of the house matched the outside. Old money and old taste, but meticulously kept. The foyer alone was bigger than my entire apartment. Gleaming hardwood, a chandelier that looked like it belonged in a museum, and rugs that were clearly real antiques, not knockoffs. Oil portraits lined the hallway, generations of Ashfords staring down, and in their faces I saw pieces of mine. My jaw, my eyes, my posture. I hadn't even known these people existed, and they were my family. William led me through rooms that felt unreal to me. A living room with a grand piano, a library with floor-to-ceiling shelves, a dining room set for 20. As we walked, memories surfaced in flashes. I somehow knew the layout already. I knew where the bathroom would be. I knew the kitchen had white tile and a farmhouse sink. I'd been here before. Somehow. We ended up in a wood-paneled study with a low fire, leather chairs, and a desk that looked carved from one massive tree. The room smelled like smoke and old books. William handed me a drink from a crystal decanter. I barely drink, but I held it anyway, mostly because it felt like refusing would be wrong. We sat across from each other, just looking. 30 years between us, and still the resemblance was undeniable. I met your mother in the summer of 1987, he said quietly. She was working at a little Italian place in Chelsea. Sarah. She was kind. That's what I remember most. She made everyone feel like they mattered. He told me they'd married in secret that October, in Vermont. No family, just 2 witnesses at a courthouse and plans to start a life together. They rented a tiny apartment in Queens, planned to buy this very house. For 6 months, they were happy. Then she got pregnant with me. I panicked, he said. I was terrified of my family. We're old money, banking, real estate. My father expected obedience. I was afraid of being cut off. So I did the worst thing I've ever done. He couldn't sit anymore. He stood by the window. I gave her $100,000 and told her to leave New York and never contact me again. I promised I'd send money every month, $2,000 for you. But I told her to say I didn't exist. For a long moment, the only sound was the quiet crackle of the fire. You're saying you paid child support, I said, anger rising. Because we were broke. My whole life was hand-me-downs and overdue rent notices. My mom worked herself to the end. I sent a check every month for 29 years, he said. He opened a file from his cabinet and spread pages over the desk. Copies of checks, bank statements, all made out to my mother, then to me after I turned 18. Everyone for $2,000, everyone cashed. If you and your mother never saw that money, he said, voice shaking, someone else took it, for decades. The math hit me. $2,000 a month, for almost 30 years. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. Gone. Who had access to her accounts? He asked. I knew immediately. Her sister, Margaret, my aunt. She helped with paperwork when I was a kid, then disappeared when I was around 10. Mom never talked about her after that. William wrote the name down. If she was moving the money, she stole your entire childhood. I stared at the paperwork. at the proof that our poverty didn't have to happen. I asked, "Why didn't you come for us? After she left, after she got sick?" He swallowed. "I hired private investigators. I knew where you lived, that you graduated high school, that she had stage 4 cancer. I have photos of you growing up, but the agreement she signed said I couldn't contact you or reveal who I was. My lawyers said if I broke it, you could sue me. I told myself I was protecting you. The truth is, I was a coward. It should have felt like a violation. Instead, it felt like evidence that someone had cared, even if he hadn't been there." "And then you dropped your wallet," I said. A small, sad smile. "I saw you last week, mopping floors at Hammond Financial. I recognized you instantly. You look exactly like I did at your age." I froze. I must have fumbled my wallet. When you showed up here at 3 in the morning to return it, money you clearly needed, I knew I wasn't going to waste my second chance. I was quiet for a while. So was he. "This house," I finally said, "the roses, the black dog, I remember them. How do I remember them?" "You were here," he said. "Before I sent your mother away, we'd already bought this house. She planted those roses. We adopted Duke, the black dog. You were here again when you were 3 months old. She brought you back hoping I'd change my mind. I didn't." He handed me a photo. My mother, young and exhausted and still hopeful, standing on this porch, holding me as a baby, the rose garden blazing behind her. "That was the last time I saw you," he whispered. "October 1988. I looked at my son and still sent him away. I've regretted it every day since." My throat tightened. "Why are you telling me all this now?" "Because you came back," he said simply. "Because I can finally try to fix what I broke. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want to give you what you should have had. Security, answers, the truth. And I want to go after Margaret. You and your mother were robbed." I checked my phone. 4:47 a.m. I had to be at my second job in a few hours and pretend nothing had changed, but everything had. "I need time," I said. "Take it," he said. "Just don't disappear, and let me help you get back what's yours." "I can't call you Dad," I told him. "Not yet. Maybe not ever." "William is fine," he said, "but listen to me. This house is yours. I already changed my will. Everything I own goes to you. You don't have to wait until I'm gone. You can move in now, today." I shook my head. "I have a lease, jobs, a life." "You can leave that life," he said softly. "You were never meant to live it." He pressed a card with his personal number into my hand, then wrote a check. $10,000. "I can't take this," I said automatically. "You can," he said. "Call it back pay. It's nothing compared to what you're owed. Fix your car. Breathe." He walked me to the front door. Morning was just starting to gray the sky. A big black dog padded up beside me, leaning his weight gently against my leg. "That's Duke Jr., William said. "He's from the line of the first Duke. Your mother loved that dog." Einstein, the parrot on his shoulder, clicked and said in a clear, practiced voice, "Sarah. Love Sarah. Come home." William's eyes filled. "He still says that," he whispered. "He's been saying it for 30 years. I knelt and scratched Duke Jr. behind the ears. "Good boy," I murmured. When I turned to leave, William was standing in the doorway, watching me like a man afraid to blink. "Please come back," he said. "Please don't make me wait another 30 years. "I'll call you," I said. "I promise. I just need time." I drove down the long driveway, the mansion shrinking in my rear view. He stayed on the porch the whole time, a silhouette in the doorway. I knew, without asking, that he'd watched my mother leave the same way. "Only this time," he cried, "I didn't go home. Couldn't face my apartment, couldn't face the normalcy of my routine. Instead, I drove aimlessly through the early morning streets, watching the city wake up around me. The check from William sat in my passenger seat, real and impossible and everything. At 6 a.m., I pulled into a 24-hour diner and ordered coffee I didn't want, and breakfast I couldn't eat. I just sat in the booth, staring at nothing, trying to reorganize my entire understanding of my life. My mother had been married. She'd lived in that mansion. She'd been happy once before I was born, before William paid her to disappear. She'd struggled for 30 years while money, her money, my money, went somewhere else. And then she died without ever telling me the truth. Why? Why keep that secret? Why let me believe my father was some anonymous deadbeat instead of a wealthy man who was sending money? Why struggle when help was supposedly there? Because she didn't know about the money. The answer was obvious once I thought about it. William had said the agreement was secret. My mother thought she'd been paid $100,000 and that was it. She didn't know about the monthly checks. Or if she did know about them, she never received them, and after a while, she probably assumed William had stopped sending them, that he'd broken his promise. And Margaret had been stealing them the whole time. My Aunt Margaret, who I barely remembered, who'd disappeared from my life when I was 10 or 11. She'd been opening bank accounts in my mother's name, forging signatures, depositing checks, withdrawing cash, stealing our future one deposit at a time. I pulled out my phone and did something I hadn't done in years. I searched for Margaret Turner on social media. It took some digging, but I finally found what looked like her profile. The photos were of a woman in her early 50s now, living in Florida, posting pictures of beach vacations and expensive restaurants and a lifestyle that didn't match what I remembered of her. Comments on her posts from friends asking how she could afford such a nice life. Her replies were vague. Good investments, inheritance, just lucky. Lucky. She'd stolen nearly $700,000 from her sister and nephew and called it luck. I felt rage building in me, hot and overwhelming. This woman had stolen my childhood, had stolen my mother's chance at a better life, had watched us struggle and said nothing, done nothing, just kept taking and taking and taking. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me. Hello? Nickolas? Nickolas Turner? A woman's voice, slightly nasal, familiar in a way that made my skin crawl. Who is this? It's your Aunt Margaret, honey. I heard you've been asking questions about me. It made my hair stand on end. How did you get this number? I have my ways. Listen, I know what you must be thinking. But you need to understand, I was only trying to help your mother. She asked me to manage some finances for her, and I did. If there were any irregularities, it's because your mother wasn't always organized about money. You stole from us for 30 years. That's not true. I was managing funds for you, keeping them safe until you were old enough to handle them responsibly. Your mother would have just wasted it if she'd had access to it all at once. My mother worked herself to the end while you spent money that should have been ours. I want every cent back, and then I want you arrested. Silence on the other end. Then her voice changed, got harder. You can't prove anything. Those checks were endorsed by your mother. She gave me permission to manage that money. You'll never be able to prove otherwise. William Ashford has copies of every check. The handwriting analysis will show the signatures are forgeries. You're going to prison, Margaret. If you try to press charges, I'll tell everyone what William did. How he paid your mother to disappear. How he abandoned you. His reputation will be destroyed. The Ashford name will be dragged through the mud. Is that what you want? I don't care about the Ashford name, and neither does William. You're going to return the money and turn yourself in, or we're going to hunt you down and make sure you face every possible consequence. You're making a mistake. Just let this go. I'll give you some money to make it right. 50,000, that's generous. Take it and move on. How much is left, Margaret, of the 700,000 you stole? She was quiet for a long time. About 47,000, maybe a little less. 47,000 out of nearly 700,000. She'd spent or lost everything else. and now she was trying to buy my silence with a fraction of what she'd stolen. Where are you? I don't have to tell you that. We'll find you. William has investigators on retainer. They'll find you within a day, so you can turn yourself in and maybe get some leniency, or you can run and make everything worse. I can't go to prison. I'm not built for that. Please, Nickolas. I'm your aunt. We're family. Family doesn't steal. Family doesn't watch children go hungry when they have the means to help. You're not my family. You're a thief who's about to face consequences. I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking with anger. I called William immediately. Nickolas, is everything all right? Margaret just called me. She knows we're looking for her. She's going to run. We need to find her now before she disappears. I'll call my investigators immediately. What did she say? I recounted the conversation. William listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was silent for a moment. She said there's about $47,000 left. That means she spent or lost over $650,000. We need to find out what happened to that money, where it went, whether she still has assets we can seize. How fast can your investigators work? They're already on it. I called them last night after you left. They've been tracking her digital footprint. Give me an hour. I'll have a location. I sat in the diner booth and waited. Ordered more coffee I didn't drink. Watched the morning crowd come in. Construction workers grabbing breakfast before their shifts. Business people getting coffee to go. Elderly people who'd probably been coming to this same diner for decades. Normal people living normal lives. People who knew who their parents were. People who hadn't just discovered their entire childhood was based on lies and theft. My phone rang exactly 53 minutes later. William. We found her. She's at JFK Airport trying to board a flight to Mexico City. The investigators alerted airport security. She's being detained for questioning. The police are on their way. I'm coming there. Nickolas, you don't have to. Yes, I do. This woman stole my childhood. I need to see her face when she realizes she's caught. I drove to JFK, which was a nightmare at 8 a.m. with rush hour traffic. Took me nearly 2 hours. By the time I got there, Margaret was in security custody in one of those nondescript offices that airports use for situations they don't want the public to see. William was already there, sitting in the waiting area. He stood when he saw me. She's in there. The police are questioning her. They found the remaining money in her carry-on. $47,000 in cash. She was literally fleeing the country with stolen money. Can I see her? The police said you can go in. She's agreed to talk without a lawyer present, which is stupid of her, but that's her choice. A police officer, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense expression, led me into the office. Margaret sat at a table, handcuffed, looking older and more desperate than in her social media photos. Her expensive clothes looked wrong on her now. Borrowed wealth, stolen wealth, nothing that really belonged to her. She looked up when I entered. Her eyes filled with tears. Nickolas, thank God. Tell them this is a misunderstanding. Tell them I was just managing money for the family. I pulled out a chair and sat across from her. Looked at this woman who'd stolen my childhood, who'd watched my mother work herself to the end, who'd spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on beach vacations and expensive restaurants while we ate ramen. You stole from us, I said calmly. For 30 years. You opened accounts in my mother's name. You forged her signature on checks. You took money meant to keep us fed and housed, and you spent it on yourself. My mother died thinking she'd failed me, thinking she couldn't provide, never knowing there was money that should have been ours. You watched her suffer and you said nothing. You let a child go hungry when you had the means to help, and now you're trying to flee the country with the last of what you stole. Those aren't the actions of someone managing money. Those are the actions of a criminal. I was going to give it back, I swear. I just needed more time. You've had 30 years. The detective handling the case came in then. Patricia Santos, she introduced herself. She'd been brought in specifically for financial crimes. She had documents, evidence, a timeline of theft that she'd assembled from the information William's investigators had provided. Ms. Turner, We have evidence of systematic theft over 3 decades, multiple bank accounts opened fraudulently, hundreds of checks deposited into accounts that didn't belong to you, approximately $650,000 stolen. You're being charged with grand larceny, fraud, forgery, and attempting to flee the jurisdiction. Do you understand these charges? Margaret broke down. Actually sobbed. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I had debts, credit cards, bad investments. I borrowed from the money Sarah was supposed to get, just temporarily. I was going to pay it back. But then the debts got worse and I had to take more to cover what I'd already taken. It spiraled. I couldn't stop it. Where did the money go? Through her tears, Margaret explained. Credit card debt from a shopping addiction. Failed business ventures she'd invested in. A condo in Florida she couldn't afford. Vacations, restaurants, clothes, all the trappings of a lifestyle she couldn't actually maintain. She'd been stealing for so long it had become normal to her, just something she did, not thinking about the family she was destroying. What about the $100,000? I asked. The original payment William gave my mother. What happened to that? Margaret's face crumpled further. I stole that too. Your mother left it in an account she asked me to manage. Said she wanted to keep it safe for emergencies. I started taking from it almost immediately. By the time you were 2 years old, it was gone. So my mother had never had any of the money, not the original $100,000, not the monthly payments. Everything she should have had to build a better life had been stolen by the person she trusted most. She worked herself to the end, I said. My voice was shaking now. She died in debt, in pain, thinking she'd failed me, and you had the money to help the entire time. You watched her suffer. You watched a child go hungry, and you did nothing. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I am sorry. Detective Santos laid out what would happen next. Margaret would be formally arrested, arraigned, held pending bail. Given the amount stolen and the flight risk she'd demonstrated, bail would be high, probably $500,000. The case would go to trial unless Margaret took a plea deal. With the evidence, conviction was virtually certain. What kind of sentence are we looking at? William asked. With the amount involved and the duration of the theft, 10 to 15 years minimum, possibly more depending on how the judge feels about elder abuse. Stealing from someone when they're incapacitated by illness counts as elder abuse under Connecticut law. 10 to 15 years. Margaret would go to prison. She'd be in her 60s when she got out, if she ever got out. Her life as she knew it was over. I should have felt satisfaction, should have felt like justice was being served. But I just felt empty, hollow. Margaret's conviction wouldn't bring my mother back, wouldn't give me back my childhood, wouldn't undo 30 years of struggle and pain. The remaining $47,000 will be returned to you, Detective Santos said. As for the rest, we'll pursue restitution, but realistically, if she doesn't have it, you can't recover it. I'm sorry. I left the office. William followed me out. We stood in the airport terminal, surrounded by travelers going about their normal lives, while mine fell apart and reorganized around this new truth. What happens now? William asked. I don't know. I need to get to work. I don't know. Process all of this, I guess. Take the day off. Hell, take the week off. I'll pay you whatever you would have made. You can't go stock shelves at a grocery store like nothing happened. I can't just not show up. I'll get fired. Then let them fire you. You don't need that job anymore. You have money coming. You have options. Don't go back to that life out of habit when you could have something better. But the thing was, I didn't know how to have something better. I'd spent 30 years learning to survive on scraps, learning to make do with less, learning to lower my expectations until they were practically underground. I didn't know how to want more, how to reach for better, how to accept help when it was offered. I need time, I said again. It seemed to be my default response to everything. I understand. But Nickolas, William's voice was urgent. Don't let pride or habit keep you stuck in a life that's making you miserable. Your mother wanted better for you. I want better for you. You deserve better. Take it. I drove back to the city, called in sick to my grocery store job, which wasn't even a lie because I felt physically ill from exhaustion and emotional overload. Went back to my apartment with its leaking ceiling and cheap furniture and all the markers of poverty I'd learned to ignore. But I couldn't ignore them anymore. Not after seeing William's house, not after knowing what I should have had, not after learning that someone had stolen my entire childhood. I sat on my couch and cried. Actually cried for the first time since my mother's funeral. Cried for the life I'd lost, for the mother who'd struggled unnecessarily, for the father I'd never known, for the aunt who'd betrayed us, for myself and all the years I'd spent thinking this was just how life was, that some people were lucky and some weren't, never knowing that my luck had been stolen. My phone buzzed. A text from William. Whenever you're ready, we're here. The house, the family you should have had, all of it waiting for you. No pressure. Just know you have a place to come home to. I looked around my apartment, at the bucket catching drips from the ceiling, at the furniture I'd bought secondhand or found on the street, at the life I'd built from nothing because I'd never known I was supposed to have more. And I made a decision. Margaret's trial came 6 months later. I attended every day, watching the prosecution tear apart her defense. Her expensive lawyer claimed she'd only mismanaged funds with good intentions, but the evidence proved otherwise. Fake accounts, forged signatures, stolen checks. William and I both testified, and experts confirmed the fraud. After 4 hours of deliberation, the jury found her guilty of larceny, fraud, forgery, and elder abuse. The judge condemned her for stealing from her dying sister and sentenced her to 12 years in prison, ordering restitution she'd never repay. The recovered $47,000 was returned to me. The rest was gone. Watching her taken away, I felt nothing, no victory, just emptiness. Outside, William said, "Justice was served." "Maybe," I replied, "but it doesn't bring back 30 years or my mother." He asked me to come home. Over the past months, we'd begun rebuilding our relationship, slowly learning about each other's lives, guilt, and regrets. For the first time, I said yes. I quit my jobs, left my apartment, and moved into William's mansion in Riverside. The house was overwhelming, but he gave me space. I enrolled in college, aiming for veterinary school, using the recovered money as savings. I worked with the animals, helping around the property. For the first time, life felt peaceful. Our bond grew. Morning coffee, evening rides, quiet dinners. When I told him I might never call him Dad, he said, "The title doesn't matter. What matters is that you're here." Months later, we visited my mother's grave together. William apologized to her, promising to care for me and make her sacrifice mean something. We left flowers and a photo of her holding me as a baby. Driving home, he said, "Your mother would be proud of you." I had a good teacher, I told him. She taught me to do the right thing. Returning your wallet changed everything. He smiled. You saved me too. Years passed. I became a veterinarian, opened my own clinic, and named it Turner Veterinary Clinic after my mother. William cried the day I called him Dad. He lived long enough to see me marry Lisa and meet his granddaughter Sarah. 6 months later, he died peacefully in his sleep. I found a letter on his nightstand. You saved me by giving me a chance to be your father. You made my last years the best of my life. I love you. I'm proud of you. Dad. At his funeral, I spoke about redemption and second chances, how returning a wallet had led to everything I'd lost and more. Now, walking through the house that became our home, I know the truth. It was never about money. It was about honesty leading to family, forgiveness, and love. 30 years of absence, 7 years of peace. Not enough, but enough.